Hello YouTube, this is William. Welcome to another Whittle Talk. This is part 2 in the carving series, the carving tips and my opinion on wood carving and what I've learned, and pass on to you guys and let you guys try it, see if it works for you. And today, this is part 2. Like I said, we're going to talk about knives that is used in the carving world. Sloyd knives, whittlers, carving knives, and a lot of times all of that meshes into one. Okay, so there's a lot of different styles and different makes and different things that goes into what is considered a whittler or carving knife. Now you have things like this crooked knife that is used for making canoes and planing wood and making dimensional lumber from rough stock. It's used to make bowls and rounding corners. A lot of things. If you're interested in the crooked knife, go back to my videos. There's lots of videos about the crooked knife and its uses and what it can do for you. Now that is a good carving knife for certain things, useful things in camp. It's not good for intricate things like this. We'll get into what you can use for that. But when you're talking about dimensional lumber, things like that, to build things like canoes, pack frames, so forth, then this knife is king. Okay. There's also another version of a crooked knife which is straighter. Doesn't have the crook on it, but it's still considered a crooked knife because of it's used as a one-handed draw knife. So it's another aspect of a crooked knife. Now there's also spoon knives or hook knives that is used to make spoons, spoon bowls, things like that, and that's what those typically look like. This is one of mine that I made, but you can buy these from Mora and a few other makers out there make those. But that's also considered a carving knife. But what we want to really talk about is a sloyd knife or a whittler. And probably the most common knife that's out there is a Mora, which is typically like this. And it is a very good representation of what I would consider a sloyd knife, which is typically designed to perform solely as carving. Has a Scandi grind, very fine sharp tip, a short blade, narrow blade, something that gets in there and is easily to remove a lot of material on your carving, your wood carving, your decorative carving. So that is what I consider a very fine sloyd knife. Now let's talk about the different aspects of knives, and then I'll tell you what I think is a great or the best carving design. Okay. Here's another sample of one of my knives. It's a very sharp blade. It's a little bit thicker, but it still has a decent point on it. This one has a very thick handle, and we'll talk about handles in a moment, because I think that's all part of a good knife is a good comfortable handle. But we'll talk about that in a moment. But this one has a short blade. This one has a saber grind, but it's still a fairly thin blade, and I think that a thin blade is paramount when you're talking about whittlers and carvers. You want something that doesn't have a lot of drag when you're trying to go through material. So the thinner the blade, the better off you are. This is another one of mine. This is more of a typical whittler or carver because it comes to a very sharp point, has a narrow blade, thin blade. This one's 3/32 with a very fine Scandi grind on it. This is a great little whittling knife. Okay, again, the blade shape tells you that this is a whittler because it's thin. It gets into those intricate places and very tight places, and to get that material out. Here's another example. This one's a full flat. This one was an 1/8 inch, but it's full flat. This is the knife that I use to carve this width, and this. while on camp. If you go back through my videos, I'll talk about that and show that in my videos. I think they were uploaded just a few weeks ago, or a couple of weeks ago anyway. But this is the knife I used. It has a very fine point, sloping edge. It's a full flat, which is very thin, so it doesn't have a lot of drag when you're going through material. Okay. And the last one is one that I made. It's a very, very thin, narrow blade, and I mean this one is strictly for intricate carving. That's all it's for. Which is a full flat, very, very thin, flexible a blade. And it does real well at getting in those very tight places and removing material. Now, our forefathers, they didn't have knives like this, or they didn't make knives like this. We don't see very many of them throughout history. I think Sweden is the first one, or Scandinavia is the first one that really come out with dedicated carving knives. But we got along very well because practically everyone had a folding jackknife, and that's what they used to carve with. This is a very good representation of one. This is a three-bladed jumbo stock one from Mora, and there was different versions and different styles, but this is very typical of what they would carry. And there's many stories of them sitting on camp and carving a new gun stock, a pipe, even doing intricate carving as far as horses and things like that, because it was a good way to whittle away the time, if you will. It was something to kill the time and ease the monotony if you were stuck in camp during storms or whatever. So you pulled out your little jackknife and you did carving. Not to mention tent stakes and pot hangers and things like that, because they wanted to save their belt knife, because the steel wasn't as good then as it is now. They wanted to save that resource for skinning game and kitchen prep and things like that, and they didn't want to dull their edge. They wanted to save that edge just for those tasks. Whereas this, their jackknife, did all their carving and their whittling and their multi-purpose stuff. Okay? So what I consider strictly a carving or a whittling knife, I think this is about as good as representation on the blade as you can get. I think Mora knocked this one out of the park with this design. You want something that has a very, very fine point. You want something that's narrow. You want a very thin blade. This one has a Scandi, which to me, Scandi and wood, soft woods, just go together. So if you want a knife dedicated for strictly that, then I think that is the best option that you can get as far as blade design. You want something that's very short. I think this one, the blade is 2 1/4 inches. So you want a very short blade, something that you can really get in there and get your hand as close to where you're cutting as possible, because remember, in part 1, that's part of blade control. That's part of safety, is to have your hand as close to where you're cutting as possible. So the shorter the blade, you're always going to have that if your blade is real short. Okay, you can get more control over that blade. So I think that is, as far as a sloyd knife, I think that is a very good representation. Now, if you want something that has a little bit more robust, then I think that something like this is a little bit better for you. But again, it depends on what you want to use the knife for. Me personally, for an EDC, I use it as a carver. As in the shop, I use it cutting leather. Everyday task, I use this knife, which is a very fine point, very thin blade, but it's a full flat grind, very, very thin, full flat grind. And that is also, it works very well at carving, but it also works well at other tasks, and it doesn't have as much of a blade bind as, say, a Scandi would. Okay, so when you're getting into those tight places, you don't have the width of the blade to worry about when you're carving. So a full flat is another option as far as carving. Okay, personally I prefer a full flat. There's nothing wrong with a Scandi, but I prefer a full flat so that I can use it for many other tasks, and it doesn't have that bind, that blade bind. Okay. Alright, now on the handles, the handle is all part of controlling the blade, because if you don't have a good grip on the knife, then you're going to lose control of the blade and it's going to hurt you or mess your carving up. So you want a handle that is very comfortable, something that fits your hand, that is not slick. A lot of these Moras, that's one of the problems, is they're very slick once you get the handles wet. So a lot of people, they'll carve notches and dents and things in the handle to help improve their grip, which helps. But again, you're going to be using this knife for hours, so you need a handle that is very, very comfortable. So take the knife in your hand and just squeeze it. Squeeze it as hard as you can, then let go, and see if it feels like there's hot spots in that handle. So that will kind of give you an idea if it's going to be comfortable using for extended periods of time. So this is kind of a barrel shaped handle, which is typical on a lot of the sloyd knives. I prefer a handle with a little bit of a palm swell, but also it gives me a warning factor of when my hand is getting close to that edge. This one doesn't have that. I mean, you're on that blade before you know it. I don't want something, a guard or anything, that's going to interfere with my carving, because a guard with a carving knife, it just gets in the way. But I want a handle that is comfortable, that fills up my hand like this large handle does, but it also has indents on the side here that gives me an idea or tells me, hey, you're getting close to that business end, so you need to watch what you're doing. So that is what I'm looking for in the handle, that I know where my hand's at, I know where the blade's at without even actually paying that much attention to it, and it kind of gives my hand a stop from sliding up on the blade. So again, you want a handle that fits your hand, that's thick, that's something you can hold on to, you can control the blade. A lot of people like flatter handles like this, so that the blade doesn't twist as much in their hand. Again, this one has a little bit of a swell there, so that it lets you know when you're coming up on the business end. This one is a little bit more barrel shape, which it feels good in the palm. It sits in the palm quite nicely. It has a little bump out here, so it tells you when you're sliding up on next to the blade. So again, it gives you warning. It's comfortable in the hand. It provides control of the blade, and it's not slick when after use, when your hands are sweaty. It's just, it becomes part of your hand, a finger, another digit, if you will. So that's what you're looking for in a handle. Overall, you're looking for a knife that is comfortable, that has a narrow blade, a thin blade, a sharp point, something that has a very fine, thin edge, either a full flat or a very fine Scandi edge. You're looking for something that is comfortable to use for extended periods of time and still allow you the control that you need to control the blade. With all that said, once you find that knife, hang on to it, because they don't come around very often. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope it gave you some pointers of what to look for in a knife, a sloyd knife or a carving knife. That's what I look for. Again, this is my favorite design here. It doesn't have it doesn't have as much of a swell, but it has enough there that I feel where I'm getting next to the edge. Very thin, flat, full flat. To me, this is my perfect carving knife, general EDC knife, is this design right here. And it stays right there with me every day, okay? But that's me. You guys need to explore. This is a very good knife to start out with. Matter of fact, some people, they never graduate from this. They like it so well that they continue to use it the rest of their life. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a very good knife. It was designed very well. So that's an option for you. Look at more of them. If you want to graduate to a custom model, something you can hand down to your children, then maybe you look at a custom model, something similar to this, for your carving and whittling pleasure. Okay. So until the next one, you guys get out in the woods, get in the backyard, whittle on a stick, carve a little bit, try this out. I mean, you never know what you can do unless you try it. Take it slow. Don't get in a hurry. Be sure and watch what you're doing, and don't force the knife to do something that it doesn't want to do. And the more you use a knife, the more you'll understand it and understand what the wood is telling you. If you get in the bind, stop. Reattack it, if you will. Go from a different angle, because once you get in the bind and it releases, then it's going to mess your carving up at the minimum, or it's going to mess you up at the most. So, but if you do get out in the backyard, whittle on a stick, get in the woods, be sure and take plenty of band-aids and lots of knives with you. We'll catch you again soon. Bye.